everybody. This is Empowering Democracy, and I'm your host, Joe Firestone. Our topics for tonight are SCOTUS's contempt for the facts, also presidential immunity, the intersection of presidential immunity as decided by the Supreme Court with Project 25, pretty important question. And then finally, commentary on election 2024, and the way it's looking, right now. So, let me start then with a piece I picked up at Portside. It's called "The Supreme Court Contempt for Facts is a Betrayal of Justice." In rejecting facts to please their political party and their patrons, the justices of the Supreme Courts of the Supreme Court majority have broken their oath made to both the Constitution and the American people. This piece was published on July 12, 2024, and the authors were the Scientific American editorial board. The piece comes out of Scientific American. I picked it up on portside.org. When the Supreme Court's Ohio versus EPA decision blocked Environmental Protection Agency limits on Midwestern states, polluting their downwind neighbors, a sad but telling coda came in Justice Neil Gorsuch's opinion. In 5 instances, it confused nitrogen oxide, a pollutant that contributes to ozone formation, with nitrous oxide, better known as laughing gas. You can't make this stuff up. This repeated mistake in the 5-4 decision exemplifies a high court not just indifferent to facts, but contemptuous of them. Public trust in the Supreme Court, already at historical low, is now understandably plunging. In the last 4 years, a reliably Republican majority on the Supreme Court, led by Chief Justice John Roberts, has embarked on a remarkable spree against history and reality itself, ignoring or leading the facts in decisions involving school prayer, public health, homophobia, race, climate change, also abortion and clean water, not to mention the laughing gas case. The crescendo to this assault on expertise landed in June, when the majority's Chevron decision arrogated to the courts regulatory calls that have been made by civil servants, scientists, physicians, and lawyers for the last 4 years. With stunning understatement, the Associated Press called it, quote, a far-reaching and potentially lucrative victory to business interests, unquote. No kidding. The decision enthrones the High Court and unelected majority as a group of technically incompetent, in some cases, politicos in robes, with power over matters that hinge on vital facts about pollution, medicine, employment, and much else. These matters govern our lives. The 2020 Kennedy versus Bremerton School District School prayer decision hinged on a fable of a football coach offering, quote, a quiet personal prayer, unquote, in the words of the opinion. In reality, this coach was holding overt post-game prayer meetings on the 50-yard line, ones that an atheist player felt compelled to attempt to keep off the bench. Last year's 303 creative versus Elenis decision, allowing a web designer to discriminate against gay people, reviled entirely on a supposed request for a gay wedding website that never existed, that supposedly came from a straight man who never made the request. Again, you don't make this stuff up unless you're on the Supreme Court. Then it becomes law. Summing up the court's term on July 1st, the legal writer Chris Geidner called attention to a more profound, important, and disturbing reality, quote unquote, of the current majority's relationship to facts. When it needs to decide a matter for the right, it can and does accept questionable, if not false, claims as facts. If the result would benefit the left, however, there are virtually never enough facts to reach a decision, unquote. The quote, laughing gas decision illustrates this nicely. EPA had asked 23 states to submit a state-based plan to reduce their downwind pollution. Of those, 21 proposed to do nothing to limit their nitrogen oxide emissions. Not nitrous oxide, nitrogen oxide emissions. Two others didn't even respond to that extent. Instead of telling the states to cut their pollution as required by law, the court's majority invented a new theoretical responsibility for EPA to account for future court cases, keeping a state out of its Clean Act purview, and sent the case back to an appeals court. This means that pollution will cause an estimated 1,300 premature deaths in 2026. Keeps on coming. Where fantasy prayers and fake cakes tip the scales of justice on one side, quote, an underdeveloped theory that is likely to succeed on the merits, unquote, is described in a rare dissent from Republican Justice Amy Coney Barrett, swung things the other way for polluters. The decision seems aimed at hobbling the EPA by demanding it thoroughly respond to every inane public comment submitted by polluters in perpetuity before issuing a regulation, warns climate writer Robinson Meyer of Heatmap. Climate change, in particular, seems to draw out the court's taste for fiction. The 2022 West Virginia versus EPA decision that halted efforts to limit greenhouse gas emissions from coal power plants and other 6-3 opinion saw the majority enshrine a, quote, major questions, unquote, doctrine. This legal theology, conjured from the penumbras and emanations of past anti-regulatory decisions, insists that sizable regulations require patently impossible to acquire congressional authorization. This is a power grab, quote unquote, by the court, anointing itself the economy's czar. Science is dismissed and disdained in its war on reality. For example, a late June decision upholding bans on homeless people sleeping in public places criminalizes human biology, as the dissent has noted. A frankly despicable decision this year to legalize bump stocks turned on gun fetishists' scholastic argument that holding your finger taut while the rifle bucks around it, pumping bullets into men, women, and children, with more than 400 people shot and 60 killed this way in Las Vegas in 2017, is not truly automatic weaponry. That's despite research showing a greater trend of greater fatalities and mass shootings enabled by just such technology. The 2022 vaccine mandate decision, another 6-3 masterpiece, turned on sophistry that workplace rules only cover hazards found solely in the workplace, but somehow excluding, say, forced air breathing with infected employees, and ignored the deeper reality that vaccines save lives. The majority of justices doubtless contributed to the hundreds of thousands of deaths of unvaccinated people in the United States from COVID with their decision. A Clean Waters Act last year decreed wetlands only environmentally protected if their waters possessed a continuous surface connection, quote unquote, with a larger body of water. This invented requirement is wholly at odds with how water and wetlands actually work, leaving up to half of the country's protected wetlands now available for dredging. The 2022 Dobbs case ended the right to abortion, a basic medical procedure that helps people manage their own health and bodies and has saved countless lives. The only arguments against abortion are not scientific but theological. The court waved away concerns about the two very predictable health impacts of Dobbs. 2 years later, news reports abound of women facing dangerous pregnancies and people in states with stringent abortion restrictions reporting worse mental health. Infant mortality is up almost 13% in Texas. The court's July 1st decision to immunize Donald Trump from prosecution for official acts, quote unquote, undertaken in office as president means, quote, it can never again be said that in America no man is above the law, unquote, unquote. Retired federal judge J. Michael Ludig noted in response to the decision. No evidence of official act undertaken as part of a criminal unofficial one is permitted, the court added, as well as no inquiry into the chief executive's motives, both curious exclusions from criminal investigations that should rest on facts. Quote, facts are stubborn things, unquote, observed John Adams in 1770, speaking at a murder trial of redcoats who fired into a crowd at the Boston Tea Party before a judge sworn to serve a king. Quote, whatever may be our wishes, our inclinations, or the dictates of our passions, they cannot alter the state of facts and evidence, nor is the law less stable than the fact, unquote, added Adams. Not so for our Supreme Court majority. Before taking office, justices must take an oath to, quote, administer justice without respected persons and do equal right to the poor and to the rich, that I will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties, unquote. In rejecting facts to please their political party and their patrons, the justices of the courts, of the court's majority, have broken their oath, made to both the Constitution and the American people. I thought that was a really, really interesting article. Not even so much for itself, but for the next article that we're going to go into. Of course, some of the examples cited here is outrageous. The confusion of nitrous oxide and nitric oxide is ridiculous. I mean, just ridiculous. But anyway, let's stop sharing this one and go on to the next. This one is from Truth Out. Okay, it's by Marjorie Cohn, who's one of the leading writers on constitutional law and legal things in general. And there's a picture of Donald Trump. Okay, I think that's Eric behind him. Former President Donald Trump attends the first day of the Republican National Convention at the Fiserv Forum on July 14th, 2024 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The images are by Joe Radel and Getty Images. As Marjorie Cohn says, as reports about the attempted assassination of Donald Trump and concerns about Joe Biden's ability to beat him continue to permeate headlines, we mustn't be distracted from how Trump will govern if given another presidential term. Quote, Project 2025, unquote, provides a roadmap for a second Trump administration to target reproductive health care efforts, also efforts to remediate the climate crisis, immigrants, unions, civil rights for LGBTQ plus people, and administrative agencies that protect our health and safety. Excuse me. His first administration also proved he is eager to impose huge tax cuts for corporations and the super rich. Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio, who Trump tapped to be his running mate, favors many of Trump's white supremacist, anti-immigrant, anti-abortion, anti-climate policies. A combination of Trump's authoritarian character and the Supreme Court's grant of absolute immunity to U.S. presidents for official acts will mean it's open season on Trump's perceived enemies should he secure a second term, and the policies he aims to implement are chilling. The likely priorities of a second Trump administration are spelled out in the Heritage Foundation's 920-page blueprint for a radical right-wing agenda, which is called, quote, a mandate for leadership, a conservative promise, unquote, for 2025. Commonly known as, quote, Project 2025, unquote, this roadmap to fascism, sponsored by more than 100 reactionary groups, spearheaded by over a dozen former Trump officials, cost more than $20 million to produce. Quote again, the next administration will face a significant challenge in unwinding policies and procedures that are used to advance radical gender, racial, and equity initiatives under the banner of science, unquote. Former budget director Russell Vought, president of the Center for Renewing America, CRA, wrote in one section of the blueprint, quote, similarly, the Biden administration's climate fanaticism will need a whole of government unwinding. Quote, I know nothing about Project 2025, unquote, Trump wrote on Truth Social on July 5th. Quote, I have no idea who is behind it. I disagree with some of the things they're saying, and some of the things they're saying are absolutely ridiculous and abysmal, unquote. Still, he went on to wish them good luck. Quote again, the Trump has tried to distance itself from the most radical aspects of Project 2025. There are no benefits, only political liabilities to endorsing so many specifics, unquote, Jonathan Blitzer wrote, in the New Yorker. Quote again, Trump supporters already know what he stands for in a general sense, and there is the more delicate matter of the former president's ego, unquote, Blitzer said. Excuse me again. A former senior White House official said to Blitzer that Trump, quote, wouldn't want to be seen as taking guidance from any other human being. He doesn't like to be seen as someone who doesn't know everything already, unquote. But Trump's anti-immigrant, anti-union, anti-education, pro-fossil fuel, quote, Agenda 47, unquote, has, quote, tremendous overlap, unquote, with Project 2025, said Heritage Foundation President Kevin Roberts. Trump's attempts to distance himself from the project are, quote, a political tactical decision, unquote, Roberts said. Project 2025 director Paul Dans noted in the video that, quote, that Trump is, quote, very bought in with this, unquote. Quote again, an unprecedented embrace, unquote, of fascism. Quote, Project 2025 is more than an idea. It's a dystopian plot that's already in motion to dismantle our democratic institutions, also abolish checks and balances, chip away at church-state separation, and impose a far-right agenda that infringes on basic liberties and violates public will, unquote. California Representative Jared Huffman, a Democrat, who leads a Stop Project 2025 task force of House Democrats, said in a statement on June 11th, this is an unprecedented embrace of extremism, fascism, and religious nationalism, orchestrated by the radical right and its dark money backers, unquote, Huffman said, and quote again, we need a coordinated strategy to save America and stop this coup before it's too late, unquote. On May 20th, Trump posted a video on Truth Social characterizing his potential 2025 to 2029 administration as a, quote, unified Reich, unquote, seemingly referencing Hitler's Third Reich in Nazi Germany. In their recent book, Fascism on Trial, Education and the Possibility of Democracy, Henry A. Giroux and Anthony R. DiMaggio, two well-known writers on the left, list characteristics of fascism, including political authoritarianism, white supremacy, white nationalism, Christian nationalism, political violence, and racism in education. These themes run throughout Project 2025 and Trump's agenda. The four main prongs of the blueprint are restoring, quote, the family as the centerpiece of American life, dismantling the administrative state, okay, see the Loper decision that overturned Chevron deference, defending U.S., quote, sovereignty, borders, and bounty, unquote, and securing, quote, our God-given individual rights to live freely, unquote. All executive power would rest in the hands of the president. If Project 2025 is put into practice, Trump could circumvent Congress by granting himself complete control over all administrative agencies that protect every aspect of our lives. Moreover, the Supreme Court has just ruled that a federal agency doesn't have the last word on protecting workers' health, safety, and climate. It must now defer to courts, increasingly staffed with judges appointed by Trump when a statute is ambiguous. Project 2025 recommends that a second Trump administration reinstitute his Schedule F, which Joe Biden eliminated. This would reclassify 50,000 of the 2 million merit-based civil service employees as political appointees who serve at the pleasure of the president without civil service protections. There would be a, quote, massive exodus of competence, unquote, Jacqueline Simon, policy director of the American Federation of Government Employees, said to John Oliver on the June 16th episode of, quote, Last Week Tonight, unquote. For example, she said, scientific research on nuclear power would be done by, quote, incompetence, unquote. The thrust of the blueprint to deconstruct the administrative state and implement deregulation is aimed at helping corporations earn more profit. Quote, positive plans for freeing the private sector from overblown government interference and regulation could, we believe, resulted in an explosion of entrepreneurial activity that would reassert America's leading role in the world's economy, unquote, the authors of Project 2025 wrote. If Trump follows the blueprint laid out in Project 2025, his new administration would strictly limit access to abortion. Congress wouldn't have to make abortion medication unlawful because Trump's Food and Drug Administration could just withdraw its approval. Project 2025 advocates the creation of a Department of Life, quote unquote, to further the health and well-being of all Americans from conception to natural death, quote unquote. The new administration would explicitly state that abortion is not health care. Planned Parenthood would be prohibited from receiving Medicaid funds. Project 2025 would also have Trump abolish the Department of Education, which Vogt calls the, quote, Department of Critical Race Theory, unquote. The plan says, quote, the noxious tenets of critical race theory, quote unquote, and, quote, gender ideology, unquote, should be excised from curricula in every public school in the country, unquote. The blueprint calls for the abolition of Head Start, the child development program that helps break the cycle of poverty by assisting preschool children of low-income families. It would fund private school vouchers and ban curricula that teach about slavery. It would prohibit non-citizens from living in federally assisted housing and, quote, oppose any efforts to weaken single-family zoning, unquote. And then, moving on to Christian nationalism, quote, religious devotion and spirituality are the greatest sources of happiness around the world, unquote, Project 2025 states. Vogt's CRA drafted a document with priorities for Trump's second term. It cites, quote, Christian nationalism, unquote, as crucial to its vision for the administration. The criteria for immigrants to enter the United States, Vogt says, should be whether that person, quote, accepted Israel's God, laws, and understanding, of history, citing biblical teachings. The next conservative president must make the institutions of American civil society hard targets for woke culture warriors. Project 2025 reads, quote, this starts with deleting the terms of sexual orientation and gender identity, quote, SOGI, S-O-G-I, diversity, equity and inclusion, DEI, quote unquote, gender equality, gender equity, gender awareness, gender sensitive, also abortion, reproductive health, reproductive rights, and any other term used to deprive Americans of their First Amendment rights out of every federal rule, agency regulation, contract grant regulation, and piece of legislation that exists, unquote. The blueprint states that those with gender dysphoria should be expelled for military service, unquote. It would, quote, reverse policies that allow transgender individuals to serve in the military, unquote. Climate, trade, and immigration is the next section. Under Project 2025, Trump's new administration would carry out mass deportations of undocumented immigrants, deploy active duty military personnel, and the National Guard to police the border and complete construction of the border wall. When the Attorney General issues a warrant for an undocumented immigrant, Title 8 U.S.C. 1226 says the immigrant may be arrested and detained. The blueprint would change the may to, quote, must, unquote, and require arrest and detention. Project 2025 also recommends eliminating all initiatives to combat climate change, including dismantling the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which tracks hurricanes, weather, oceans climate, and fisheries science. I'll bet that little item causes the death of many, many people across the United States. That's my comment on it. It would eliminate offices in the Department of Energy dedicated to renewable energy and climate and energy technology research. The blueprint calls for reducing proposed fuel economy levels and would enlist Congress to eliminate energy efficiency standards for household appliances. Kathleen Escama, president of the Western Energy Alliance, who co-wrote the Interior Department section of the blueprint, told The Hill that this section is, quote, all about increasing oil and gas development and production from federal lands, unquote. She said the proposals are intended to reverse the policies of the Biden administration that restrict fossil fuel development. The chapter on the Environmental Protection Agency urges an, quote, update, unquote, to the EPA's 2009 finding that greenhouse gas emissions constitute a threat to human health and the environment. Project 2025 urges that the U.S. withdraw from the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Paris Agreement. Also, a virulent anti-China theme runs throughout Project 2025, which calls China an, quote, existential threat, unquote. The blueprint says, quote, by far the most significant danger to American security, freedoms, and prosperity is China, unquote. It makes the astounding statement, quote, economic engagement with China should be ended, not rethought, unquote. Project 2025 advocates increased spending on the military and expansion and modernization of the nuclear arsenal. The U.S., quote, needs to make the design, development, and deployment of new nuclear warheads a top priority, unquote, it says. Project 2025 also takes aim at U.S. treaty obligations, the United Nations, and the European Union. It says that the U.S. must be removed, quote, from any association with UN and other efforts to push sustainable development schemes connected to food production, unquote. It would also require an immediate freeze on all efforts to implement unratified treaties and international agreements. The blueprint says there should be, quote, an immediate stand down on enforcement of any treaties that have not been ratified by the Senate. Such action would violate the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties, which the U.S. considers customary international law and thus part of federal common law. The convention says that when the U.S. signs a treaty, even if it is not ratified, it cannot take actions inconsistent with the object and purpose of the treaty. Moreover, the U.S. routinely violates treaties to which it is a party. Quote, target list of 350 people to be arrested in the Trump administration. On June 30th, consistent with his history of seeking revenge against his perceived enemies, Trump called for the prosecution by televised military tribunals of people on his hit list. They include Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Chuck Schumer, Senator Mitch McConnell, Mike Pence, Nancy Pelosi, Liz Cheney, Adam Schiff, Jamie Raskin, Peter Aguilar, Zoe Lofgren, and Benny Thompson. Ivan Raiklin, self-described, quote, future secretary of retribution, unquote, in the Trump II administration, has prepared a, quote, target list, unquote, of 350 public officials and journalists he considers traitors. Quote, this is a deadly serious report. But U.S. Representative Jamie Raskin, Democrat of Maryland, told Raw Story. Quote, a retired military officer has drawn up a, quote, deep state target list, unquote, of public officials he considers traitors along with our family members and staff. His hit list is a vigilante death warrant for hundreds of Americans and a clear and present danger to the survival of American democracy and freedom. Given the Supreme Court's recent immunity decision, Trump could get away with his retribution if he convinces a court they were official acts. Under the court's new test, it will be very difficult to prove an act is unofficial. The writing is on the wall. If Trump is elected president, he may well be emboldened to institute a fascist state. So, I thought many things in that article related to Project 2025 were quite shocking, especially the idea of a hit list. In fact, I even think it would behoove Joe Biden well, obviously, I'm not quite sure how to frame this, but what I will say is if Trump can do this under Project 2025, then Biden can do it between now and January 20th. He can do it between now and January 20th. Now, he says he will not do it, of course. He will not take advantage of the new powers given to him by the Supreme Court. But damned, if there was a target list that was existing, and it included me, the way it includes Joe Biden, I would certainly defend myself. The question is, why won't Joe Biden defend himself? That's a question. The other question is why the Supreme Court, of course, has such a problem with the facts. What is going on in that particular body? I suppose we know what's going on. It's bribery by the very rich. That's what's going on there. But let us leave, before we leave, let us emphasize this dangerous intersection between Project 25 and the newly decided presidential immunity ruling, of the Supreme Court. You can see that ruling makes Project 2025 doubly dangerous for people. And that's incidentally, there is some breaking news at Forbes, which I'm not going to pull up, that increases the pressure on Joe Biden to drop out. Some latest 2024 polls reported on by Forbes. I don't know what those are, but that's a very good transition to the last part of our stream for tonight, which is the topic of elections 2024. Sandy! Hello, Sandy. It's amazing to see you. Long time no see. but I'm very, very happy to see you. Anyway, we're discussing election 2024 at this point. Okay, what are we seeing? First, we're seeing that Biden is on the cusp, okay, of dropping out. And the Democrats will then move, okay, to select the nominee who won't be official for another month, okay, from now, because the Democratic convention does not end until August, okay, 19th. Yeah, really good to see you too, Sandy. So, yeah, this is very, very scary. So, within that month, there's going to be a vacuum while the Democratic Party pulls itself together, okay, around, okay, a particular person. We ought to discuss who some of these people may be, and I'll get to that in just a minute. But first, I want to note that this really represents a great opportunity for Bobby Kennedy, because without a candidate for the running for the Democratic Party, if he runs an aggressive campaign this coming month with lots and lots of ads appearing, a furious ad blitz, he may be able to get quite a few people away from the nominee of the Democratic Party before that nominee even appears. It's a really good opportunity for him. Especially that's the case if he changes some of his ridiculous positions, okay, on policies. I will briefly go over those once again. Take just a few minutes, okay, to go over those, because it really would cut into this opportunity that he has if he sticks with all of them. If you recall, he has said that the filibuster is a democratic institution of the Senate, which he won't try to change. That is a thoroughly stupid opinion, and one that would hamstring, okay, any presidency of his. Second, he's been known to say that Medicare for all is going to be a really heavy lift, so he's not going to pursue it. Now, I'm not saying he should pursue it first thing, okay, in office. What I am saying is that 70% of the voters want it. Way over 80% of Democratic voters want it. So if he wants to attract Democrats to his ticket, he should come out like gangbusters for Medicare for all right now. He has said that it would be a heavy lift in office, that he's for it in principle, but it would be a heavy lift if it comes into office. But why has Medicare for all never passed before in all these years? The reason why it's never passed is because it's never had a president behind it. I think if you've got 70% of the voters in back of something and you have a president behind it, that's all you need to actually get it through. And it would be a tremendously popular thing to do. Second of all, his position on big money has been kind of ambiguous. He's spoken against the big money politics. He's spoken against the corruption in both parties, both the Democratic, okay, and also the Republican Party. But he's taking big money himself. What he needs to do is assert that for now he's been taking some big money to get started and to have a chance to get his message out through the election. And he can refer to the troubles other third party people are having in getting their message out because they have no money. Now, he has considerable money taken from large contributors, and of course, he now can base a good bit of his campaign, on the money Nicole Shanahan has. She can freely contribute money because she's on the ticket, and that money can be used to create a ground game to get his message out. But what he should be saying is that he's against the role of big money in politics. If he gets elected, he'll pass legislation to get rid of big money in politics. He'll make sure that his next election has a verbiage from the exceptions clause of Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution to prevent the Supreme Court from declaring the legislation that he puts forward unconstitutional. He can also say he'll move for an amendment, but first he'll pass the legislation to stop the flow of big money into politics. He can repeal the CU decision of 2010. He can stop the super PACs in their tracks when he gets into office. He needs to promise that. He needs to promise he'll also stop the PAC contributions as well. He needs to promise he'll stop all contributions greater than $200 from individuals, only small dollar donations that are allowed. And he needs to promise that for himself, for the rest of the campaign, he won't take any more big money other than money internal to his campaign, but through Nicole, and her resources. And the reason why he should do that is to say to people, look, I'm beholden to no one, except for Nicole, who's my vice president. So that is all in the family, as it were. It's not going to affect our decision making because I'm already consulting her, on everything I do because, she's my vice president. So, if you want to say I've been bought, I've only been bought by a very few people. Whereas President Trump and President Biden are bought by many, many people. They're bought by the whole oligarchy. Why would you want to vote for them? They have to represent the oligarchy. I don't. So vote for me. And I'll pass some legislation the Supreme Court won't have any say over. And that would be the end of big money in politics. And of course, his position on Israel-Palestine is really ridiculous, but it's easy to get around that. What he can do is he can say, look, I love Israel. I am always for the continued existence, of Israel. But I'm looking at the policy that Israel is following. It's committing a genocide, in Gaza. And because of that, it's mobilizing most of the rest of the world, against it. And that mobilization is beginning to threaten the existence of Israel. I want to save Israel. I think the way to save Israel is to force them to go to the table, to negotiate, to recognize the Palestinian rights, to get a solution of two states inside of Palestine, which has been the position of the UN for decades and decades and decades, and always has been blocked by the Israelis. In order to get the Israelis to go to the table, if I become the president, I'm going to stop the shipment of arms to Israel at that point, and the Gaza war will end. And Israel will have to negotiate and reach a fair settlement. That's what he has to say, and he has to attribute it all to his love for Israel. I personally think that is actually plausible. Okay, and the reason why it is because you can love Israel and want it to continue to exist, and strongly disagree with the Netanyahu policy, which is threatening its very existence more and more with each passing day. Then there's the issue of austerity. He's been talking about federal debts, federal deficits, running off at the mouth in the way that the austerity mongers do about how large, our debts are. So what he has to say is, well, he still thinks our debts are a very serious problem, and that fiscal responsibility, is very important, but that he's come up with a solution to the federal debt problem that will reduce the debt to nothing or nearly nothing over 30 years. And he has to say, there's one method that I'll talk about now, another method I'll talk about sometime later, but the simplest method, which will be in the sole control of the president, will be to mint $100 trillion coin, which we can then use to pay off all the federal debt as it falls due over 30 years, all $35 trillion of it. And there will be enough left over to handle federal deficits for the next 10 years, as well. So there will be no need to issue any more debt instruments for 10 years. And at the end of that time, a very, very large proportion of the debt, 90 to 95% of it, will be paid off. He needs to take that position and to assure people that to get rid of the debt, he won't run austerity policies. Those are very, very unpopular. He will run policies for growth that's not in conflict, with the environment, and he will run policies that produce prosperity for many, many people. He also has to talk about the climate emergency more. He's very good in talking about the environment, clean air, clean water, and so on. But he never talks about the climate emergency. It makes you think he doesn't recognize there's a climate emergency. He's got to announce plans to meet the climate emergency. He's got to announce support, for the Green New Deal. That's important. He can do his own version of the Green New Deal, of course. I mean, everybody's talking about a Green New Deal has a different version. Jill Stein's version was different from Howie Hawkins. Of course, Bernie Sanders' version was different from the other two. Joe Biden's version of it, which he sort of started on, was certainly very different. Bobby Kennedy's version can also be very different, but he's got to have a version. And finally, he's got to have plans for neutering the Supreme Court. The Loper Bright, decision of the Supreme Court, which nullified Chevron deference, was outrageous. And if it remains, unless it's gotten rid of between now and January 20th, 2025, but even starting now, it's going to create great problems for the environmental changes that would be signature changes for a Bobby Kennedy presidency. He won't be able to implement those changes. He won't be able to use the administrative state to change things unless the Supreme Court decision, the Loper Bright decision, is neutered and Chevron deference becomes the law of the land, once again. So he's got to get a law passed through Congress. He's got to see to it that, again, Article 3, Section 2 is used to stop the Supreme Court from overturning that law. There are also quite a number of other laws that have to be passed between January 3rd, and January 20th, after the election of a new president, that if they're not passed in the period from January 3rd to January 20th, and if Bobby Kennedy wins, that he will have to pass when he gets into office. And he's got a campaign on them now. There are so many decisions of the Supreme Court that are cutting out the heart out of government. I've talked at length about them here in earlier streams. I'll talk about them again in the future. But certainly the Loper Bright decision has to be gotten rid of. The immunity decision has to be gotten rid of. The abortion decision has to be gotten rid of. The recent decision on the homeless, has to be gotten rid of, and on and on and on. The court decision on the Voting Act of 1965 has to be gotten rid of. The CU decision also has to be gotten rid of. For all of these things, the exceptions clause and legislation need to be used, and Bobby needs to commit to do those things. But if he does all those things and he runs an aggressive campaigns for a month, that's a chance to catch up to Trump and whoever the Democratic nominee is going to be. He's been looking for a chance to get into a situation where he has a chance to gain a plurality in the election of 2024. This is his chance. He should not be blowing it. So now, I want to move to talk about the Democrats themselves. Sandy says, yes, he would win hands down. I think he would in that situation, that circumstance. I wonder why we're not getting our usual group here for the show. I'm so glad you're back, Sandy, but there are 5 or 6 others who are not back and who usually produce a stream of comments. So I don't know where they are, but anyway, maybe something important is going on tonight. I noticed my Twitter audience is back, because the Twitter audience cannot comment here, but I see them in my indicator of how many people are watching. I was able to fix the problem with Twitter by becoming a premium member and reconnecting to Twitter. In other words, I reconnected StreamYard to Twitter. So on to the subject of what are the possibilities for the Democrats and who should they go for. And here I'm going to try to be as objective as I can. Oh, Sandy says there was a problem with the internet this morning. Yes, I know. I'm aware of that. So maybe that's keeping quite a few people off tonight. Yeah, that's important. So, Joe Biden is gone. I think Kamala Harris is simply unacceptable. When she originally ran for president, she proved to be very unpopular. She's still the same person. When she makes public statements and she comments on things and debates with people, as someone phrased it, I think it was Crystal Ball, she makes statements that are loopy. They tend to loop around. She won't be able to stand against Trump, in any debate. Oh, here's Bob Copeland. Yeah, good to see you, Robert. Very good. Okay, so she's a possibility. I think she's a bad possibility. They should not go with her. I also hear she's having trouble finding people who are willing to commit to serve as her vice president. Okay. She also represents the Hillary wing, okay, of the Democratic Party. That wing of the Democratic Party is not popular. It is not popular. She was not real popular, okay, in California. She was a mean attorney general, cruel in certain respects. She was appointed, okay, as a senator. Uh, she never had to survive a re-election. Uh, she's never shown that she's really popular or that she has any charisma. Okay, that's the last thing. Finally, when she ran in 2020, she initially raised a whole bunch of money from the big money people, okay, on Wall Street. That was well known. She was their choice. She was the donor's choice. She performed horribly, okay, in debates. Robert said she couldn't even win in California, which is her own state. Yes, I suppose she'd be able to carry California because it's a deep blue state. But I don't think the Democrats need her help to carry California because other things. Oh, Sandy says, I do too. I think Obama keeps pushing her. I'm not sure it's Obama who's pushing her. But anyway, Sandy says, I don't think she can beat Trump. I don't think she can beat Trump. I don't think she has a chance in hell against Trump. So I'm not for her. So who else? Well, there's the governor of California, it's Gavin Newsom. Gavin is slick. He can certainly stand up to Trump. Trump is going to have a tough time tearing him apart. And he'll look good in standing up to Trump. Of course, he's horribly corrupt. Horribly corrupt. I don't think that he would make, a good president. I think he'd be a younger version of Joe Biden without actually the redeeming qualities. I don't know if there's anything good to say about him except that he can beat Trump. But he'll probably beat Trump, and then as president himself, he'll probably sub rosa move us towards a kind of inverted totalitarianism. So that's my take on him. Other people being talked about, Gretchen Whitmer, who's the governor, of Michigan. As in running for governor, she was the recipient of lots of contributions from the establishment. As a governor, she's been a pretty good governor, and she was favorable to interests of the Palestinian minority, in Michigan, and appears to have had some sympathy for them and to have been responsive to them. We need someone, inside the presidency who would be willing to recognize their vital interests. Her record of good government in Michigan suggests that she would be a pretty good president. But I don't know what would happen to her given the large contributions from the billionaire donors that she would have to take in order to become the President of the United States. Uh, some people have been mentioning J.B. Pritzker, who's the governor, of Illinois. He, of course, is a billionaire himself. Of course, he's a member of the oligarchy, in good standing. They would be very comfortable with J.B. Pritzker as the President of the United States. I don't know that J.B. Pritzker would be, would be effective in running against Trump. I think there are a number of things about him that Trump wouldn't hesitate to make fun of, and I'm not sure that he can beat Trump either. For that matter, I'm not sure Gretchen Whitman uh, um, uh, would be that good either. I don't have a great deal of enthusiasm for her, but of the people I've talked about, she looks like she's the best so far. Then there's Josh Shapiro, who's the governor of Pennsylvania, who's been mentioned of late. I have a hazy impression of him as basically vaguely liberal. I don't know where he stands on what's been going on, in Israel, Palestine. That's a very vital issue. At this point, I don't know what kind of money he took when he ran for governor. I don't know whether he had strong support from AIPAC, and the Israel lobby. Have to look that up. I'd be very cautious about that. For him, it's a possibility. There's also the governor of Kentucky, whose name, is Andy Beshear. He seems to be a relatively clean gene candidate, but I have no idea what kind of foreign policy he would run. And we really need to know the views of foreign policy of these people right now. It's very, very important. One thing Bobby Kennedy would have going for him if he renounced his previous statements, on Israel and stated a new policy, on Israel, his general orientation towards international relations, is a collaborative one and one involving a search for peace. That is what we need. But we don't know at this point if there are any other Democratic candidates who would stand in that same place. Robert Copeland says, Sandy says, well, we don't need him, laugh out loud. Robert Copeland says, when Governor Newsom first ran for governor, he ran on getting single-payer health care and has not been in support of CalCare. And he says, Governor Newsom can't be trusted. Yes, I completely agree, Robert. He can't be trusted. He's not honest. And he does things that are damn stupid. Anyway, John B. is here. Hi, John B. John B. says, Harris gets to be first woman president. She gets all the post-pres perks of presidency. She is overnight an historical figure with no need to perform any presidential actions. Right. We don't need this right now. We don't need this. We need to have, a woman president who would be, a good president, who had the talent to be, a good president. That might be Gretchen Whitmer. I have to look a lot more carefully at her than I've looked so far. But her term as governor suggests that what she's all about is competence. And we need someone who's all about competence. I don't know where she stands on foreign policy. That would be very important. But I think we pretty well know where Harris stands on foreign policy. Seems to me she's a neoliberal and neocon all the way. I don't think she's going to stray from that. Yeah, I mean, I think that our world is under threat right now. Our continued existence is under threat, both from nuclear weapons and from climate change. That's more important than having an overnight historical figure, the first woman president. We don't need that. John B. says, you don't need it for sure, but I fear it's what you'll get. Harris is a professional freeloader. I noticed that. I think we've all noticed that who are at all involved in politics, over a period of time. So, I'm pretty much done with what, I have to say today. Whoever the Democrats pick, and especially if they pick, say, Newsom at this point, I think that Bobby Kennedy will do very well, against him and Trump in a three-way race. I'm looking towards that kind, of race. I don't want a Democrat to win the presidency this time because they seem seriously wedded to neoliberalism and to neoconism, in foreign policy. I don't think Gavin Newsom would be any different. All his California connections say he would not be any different. So, of the people that have been mentioned so far, I think it's either it comes down to Andy Bashir, possibly, but I don't know a lot about him. But the one I know a little bit more about, is Gretchen Whitmer. She seems like a decent choice as a Democratic choice. But if I think she's the best choice uh, for the Democrats, it's almost a sure thing they won't consider her the best choice. That they will pick, a Newsom because they think he might be able to beat Trump. So, again, I think they're going for Newsom. I think they should go for somebody else. But on the other hand, if they go for Newsom, I think that gives Bobby the best chance he's had for the presidency so far. So we will see. What else can I say? We will see. Sandy says Dems and Republicans are the same. Both want to do anything for us. Yeah, I agree, Sandy. We need to have something else. What we really need to have is Jill Stein, but she can't get her message out. There's no way she's going to get that message out. She just doesn't have enough money. We know about her. People active in politics, also know about her. We know she has the best of platforms. And I think that she's a pretty honest and sincere person. Someone who can be trusted. But I don't think she can get her message out because of the money. And with Dump the Corruption being a failure so far, she can't compensate through leading a Dump the Corruption campaign. So I think our choices, are realistic choices, are Kennedy, Trump, and whoever the Democratic nominee is going to be. If it's Whitmer, and it's a choice between Whitmer Trump and Bobby Kennedy. If Bobby Kennedy changes that critical policy of Israel can do no wrong, if he changes that, uh, he would be my choice among the three of them. He'd certainly be my choice if Gavin Newsom is the Democratic choice. So that's all I have for tonight. I'm going to go over and join Dee at Around the World with Dee and Friends to help her with her show. So I urge those of you who are here to come over with me. It's Friday night. Okay, tonight. I may see you tomorrow. I may not. I expect to be busy over the weekend, but I'll try to make a show tomorrow night. So thanks a lot. It was wonderful to see you again, Sandy. I hope this will now be a regular thing. Thank you, John B., for coming. And but thank you, Bob Copeland. Okay, it's nice to see you here. And to all the others that I can't see, it's nice to see you here too. So, I'll see you tomorrow. I should say, please don't forget about my Buy Me a Coffee account, which is up there across the stream. Okay, don't forget about my patreon.com account at patreon.com/Joe_Firestone and my Buy Me a Coffee account at buymeacoffee.com/Joe.Firestone. I could use whatever donations you can afford. So thanks very much, and I will see you all at the stream.